The capture. Commander Jackson Reed had always known space was dangerous. 18 years in Earth's unified space command had taught him that, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. The beam had come from nowhere, slicing through the hull of the exploration vessel Artemis like it was made of paper. One moment he'd been recording log entries about the unusual radiation patterns near the Kuiper Belt's edge. The next, he was engulfed in blinding purple light. Now he sat cross-legged on the floor of what could only be described as an enclosure. The transparent barrier that surrounded him hummed with energy, and beyond it moved creatures of incomprehensible forms. Some floated, some crawled, and others shifted between states of matter as they observed him. Subject displays signs of higher cognition, a melodic voice announced in what sounded like perfectly accented English, though Jackson knew that was impossible. Note the regular breathing patterns and controlled posture. Unlike the Krivax specimens, this one appears to understand its situation. Jackson rose to his feet slowly, measuring his movements. 3 meters tall and covered in iridescent scales, the being who'd spoken resembled a cross between a mantis and a dolphin. Its 6 eyes tracked Jackson's every move. "I am Commander Jackson Reed of Earth's Unified Space Command," he said clearly, meeting the creature's gaze. "I demand to know who you are and why I've been taken against my will." Excited chittering erupted from the gathered aliens. The tall one tilted its elongated head. "Remarkable," it said. "The human utilizes complex vocalization patterns consistent with language. Previous reports suggested merely basic communication skills." "I can understand you," Jackson said, frustration building. "And I know you can understand me. Why am I here?" The creature approached the barrier, compound eyes dilating with interest. "I am Curator Nexus of the Vexarian Grand Exhibition. You are here, human, because you represent an evolutionary anomaly, a species that should have destroyed itself yet somehow reached the stars." Jackson stepped closer to the barrier. "We're not specimens. We're a spacefaring civilization with rights. There are treaties." Laughter, or something like it, rippled through the gathering crowd. "Treaties apply to recognized galactic citizens," Nexus explained, as if to a child. "Your kind has yet to achieve such status. You are cataloged as potentially sentient dangerous fauna under Vexarian scientific classification." Jackson's military training kicked in as he suppressed his anger. Showing emotion would only reinforce their perception of humans as primitive. Instead, he needed to demonstrate intelligence, reason, humanity. "Then allow me to provide evidence for reclassification," he said calmly. "Give me the means to demonstrate human capabilities." This seemed to intrigue Nexus, whose appendages fluttered in what might have been excitement. "A fascinating proposal. The exhibition values accurate taxonomic representation." The curator turned to a smaller Vexarian nearby. "Keeper Lyrics, provide the specimen with basic cognitive assessment tools. Record all responses for the classification committee." The next several hours became a bizarre intelligence test. Jackson was given objects that resembled children's puzzles, mathematical challenges projected onto the barrier, and devices that created 3-dimensional problems to solve. He worked methodically through each one, occasionally making deliberate errors to study their reactions. "Extraordinary problem-solving capabilities," Nexus noted as Jackson completed a spatial reasoning task in record time. Yet the aggression markers in its neural signature remain concerning. "I'm not aggressive," Jackson insisted. "Humans are diverse. We're explorers, scientists, artists." "The historical data suggests otherwise," Nexus interrupted. "Your species has engaged in continuous warfare throughout its recorded history. Your technological advancement accelerated primarily through military applications." Jackson couldn't entirely dispute this. "We've evolved beyond those tendencies." "Have you?" Nexus's voice held genuine curiosity. "Our observation vessels documented 7 active conflicts on your planet when you were collected." The word "collected" sent a chill down Jackson's spine, like he was nothing more than a butterfly pinned to a board. As the exhibition closed for what Jackson assumed was night, the crowds thinned. Only Keeper Lyrics remained, a smaller Vexarian with pale blue scales who seemed assigned to monitor him. "You should rest," Lyrics said, dimming the lights around Jackson's enclosure. "Tomorrow's exhibition will feature comparison displays with other tool-using species." "I'm not an exhibit," Jackson said quietly. "I have a family, people who will look for me." Lyrics hesitated, multifaceted eyes blinking in sequence. "Your vessel's remains were scattered. The standard procedure ensures no traceable evidence." The implications hit Jackson hard. Earth wouldn't know what happened to the Artemis. They'd classify it as another deep space accident. No rescue would come. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Cognitive species perform better in captivity when given accurate information," Lyrics replied. Then more quietly, "And I've never conversed with a human before. You're not what the educational materials described." Jackson saw an opening, the faintest crack in the Vexarian certainty. What did they describe? Primitive predators who achieved spaceflight through accident rather than design. Dangerous, unpredictable, but potentially valuable research subjects. Lyrics moved closer to the barrier. "Yet you demonstrate capabilities comparable to Level 3 civilizations." "We're more than your studies suggest," Jackson said. "Give me a chance to prove it." Lyrics seemed about to respond when an announcement reverberated through the exhibition halls. The melodic language was unintelligible to Jackson, but Lyrics straightened immediately. "I must go. The director has called an emergency assembly." The keeper hesitated. "Tomorrow, during the comparative intelligence demonstration. Do not hold back. Director Valora believes humans are merely instinctual. Proving otherwise may be important for your treatment here." After Lyrics departed, Jackson carefully examined his enclosure. The habitat was a simplified approximation of human living conditions as imagined by aliens who'd never set foot on Earth. The plants were close but wrong, leaves too symmetrical, colors slightly off. The water tasted filtered and mineral-rich, but lacked the variations of Earth water. Most importantly, he noticed the barrier fluctuated slightly when the temperature changed. The Vexarians were cold-blooded, their technology optimized for their physiology. Human body heat created minute disturbances in the field, not enough to exploit now, but information worth remembering. Jackson sat down and closed his eyes, not to sleep but to think. If this grand exhibition was their version of a zoo, then there would be other exhibits, other species. Some might know more about the Vexarians. Some might even be allies. He needed to understand this place, these aliens, and find a way to show them that humans weren't just smart animals. They were potential partners in the cosmos. Or, if necessary, formidable enemies. As artificial night fell completely in his enclosure, Jackson made a silent promise. He would not be remembered as merely specimen human in some alien catalog. He would show them exactly what humanity was capable of, their ingenuity, their adaptability, and their unyielding determination. One way or another, Commander Jackson Reed would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. Understanding the enemy. Morning came with a kaleidoscope of colored lights cascading through Jackson's enclosure. The artificial dawn of the Vexarian exhibition was designed to accommodate the varied sleep cycles of hundreds of different species. For Jackson, who had spent the night planning rather than sleeping, it marked the beginning of his second day as an alien specimen. "Nutritional supplement delivery," announced a mechanical voice as a panel slid open in the wall. A tray emerged containing several gelatinous cubes of different colors. Jackson approached cautiously, examining the food. His military survival training had included protocols for unknown consumables. Smell first, taste a minute amount, wait for reactions. The green cube smelled faintly of algae, while a blue one had a sweet aroma reminiscent of berries. "The blue nutrition cube contains proteins compatible with your digestive system," said a now familiar voice. Keeper Lyrics had returned, accompanied by two larger Vexarians whose elaborate shell patterns suggested higher rank. "I see our specimen survived the night," said one of the newcomers, its voice deeper and more resonant than Lyrics's. "Remarkable resilience for a carbon-based life form." "Director Valora," Lyrics acknowledged with a deferential posture. This is the human I reported about, the one demonstrating advanced problem-solving capabilities. Director Valora's 6 eyes narrowed in a rippling sequence. Yes, your rather enthusiastic report suggested reclassification might be warranted. Science Administrator Thorne and I will observe today's comparative trials personally. Jackson recognized an opportunity. He stood tall and addressed the director directly. I'd like to propose a more meaningful demonstration than puzzles. Allow me to communicate with other exhibited species to demonstrate human diplomatic capabilities. The third Vexarian, presumably Science Administrator Thorne, emitted a sound like crystals tinkling. It requests interaction privileges, fascinating presumption from a level 0 species. Not presumption, Jackson countered. Evidence that humans value cooperation and exchange of knowledge, traits of civilization, not merely intelligence. Director Valora's head tilted, compound eyes reflecting Jackson in fractured images. Your suggestion has merit as an experimental protocol. Lyrics, prepare the communication chamber for multi-species interaction. Limited contact only with full barrier protocols. Jackson concealed his satisfaction. Any opportunity to communicate with other captives could provide valuable information and potential allies. 2 hours later, Jackson found himself in a hexagonal chamber with transparent barriers separating 6 different species. The Vexarians observed from a raised platform, recording devices hovering around them like metallic insects. Begin multi-species communication assessment, announced Director Valora. Subject human will attempt to establish meaningful exchange with other specimens. Jackson surveyed the other captives. To his right was a being composed entirely of blue-tinged crystalline structures that shifted and realigned constantly. Beyond that, a massive creature resembling a cross between an octopus and a bear lumbered restlessly. The other chambers contained beings even more alien. One appeared to be a sentient cloud of golden particles, another a tripod-like arthropod with delicate tendrils where a face should be, and the last a small bipedal being with metallic skin. Jackson focused on the metallic being, whose form most closely resembled his own. He raised a hand in greeting. Hello, I am Jackson Reed of Earth. The metallic being's surface rippled before it responded in a melodious voice that somehow carried through the barriers. Greetings, Earth being. I am Zendrix of the Aurelian Collective. The barriers permit sound vibrations while preventing physical contact, explained lyrics from above. All communications are translated through our central matrix. Jackson nodded, then addressed Zendrix again. How long have you been in this exhibition? By your biological time perception, approximately 3 rotations of your planet, the Aurelian replied. My presence here is voluntary, however. The Aurelian Collective has an exchange agreement with the Vexarian Assembly. This surprised Jackson. You're not a captive. Captive? The Aurelian's metallic surface shimmered with what might have been amusement. The exhibition is the preeminent biological research center in the quadrant. Many species volunteer representatives for study and cultural exchange. Jackson glanced up at the Vexarians, who were observing intently. Not all participants are volunteers, he said carefully. Indeed, rumbled the bear octopus creature, its translator rendering its growls into words. The Kralax do not volunteer. The Kralax were taken like the human. Director Valora made a notation. Observe how quickly it forms alliance with the other non-voluntary specimen. Jackson ignored the comment and continued. How many species are represented here? Over 2,000, answered Zendrix. The Vexarians are meticulous taxonomists. Their exhibition catalogs life forms from across 17 galaxy sectors. And how many are here against their will? Jackson pressed. The crystal being's structures realigned before it spoke. The concept of will is variable among consciousness types. We crystalline collective exist here because knowledge exchange benefits entropy reduction. Jackson realized he needed to shift tactics. The other beings either accepted their captivity or didn't understand his concern. He tried a different approach. What can you tell me about the Vexarians themselves? Their society, weaknesses, values. Science Administrator Thorne chittered excitedly. Note the strategic information gathering, classic predator behavior. Not predatory, Jackson corrected, looking directly at the observers. Diplomatic, understanding values is the foundation of meaningful exchange between cultures. Zendrix's metallic body elongated slightly. The Vexarians value knowledge above all else. Their civilization is structured around information hierarchy. Those who discover become elevated. The bear octopus, the Kralax, added, they fear what they cannot classify, what they fear they contain. Jackson filed this information away carefully. A society built on knowledge acquisition would have specific blind spots, particularly regarding types of knowledge they deemed irrelevant or dangerous. What about their physical adaptations, environmental preferences? He asked. They require precise thermal regulation, the cloud of particles whispered, its voice like static electricity. Their cognitive functions diminish in temperature variations. Director Valora made a sharp gesture, and the barriers briefly pulsed with energy. Sufficient demonstration, the director announced. The human shows expected information-gathering tendencies consistent with its evolutionary history as a tribal hunter. Jackson knew he was being reduced again, his actions interpreted through their limited understanding of humanity. He needed to surprise them. I would like to reciprocate the knowledge exchange, he said loudly. Allow me to share information about humans that your records may not contain. Thorne and Valora exchanged glances. Proceed, Valora finally permitted. Jackson stood straight, addressing all present, captives and captors alike. Humans value freedom above nearly all else. Throughout our history, no system of containment has ever permanently succeeded against human determination. We adapt, we overcome, and most importantly, he looked directly at Director Valora's compound eyes, we forgive those who acknowledge our sentience and right to self-determination. The chamber fell silent, even the restless Kralax stilled. Is that a threat, specimen? Thorne asked, mandibles clicking. Not at all, Jackson replied calmly. It's an opportunity. Humans make terrible specimens but excellent allies. Your records classify us as dangerous primitives, but your records are incomplete. We've overcome our self-destructive tendencies not by eliminating them, but by channeling them into exploration, discovery, and protection of others. Lyrics moved closer to the edge of the observation platform. The human suggests reclassification as potential allies rather than specimens. Preposterous, Thorne dismissed. One individual cannot speak for an entire species. Then allow me to communicate with my people, Jackson challenged. Establish contact with Earth. Judge us as a civilization, not by a single captured explorer. Director Valora's eyes performed their rippling blink sequence. Such contact would violate exhibition protocols for Level 0 species containment. Then your exhibition will never contain accurate information about humans, Jackson pointed out. You'll study a stressed captive rather than understanding a spacefaring civilization. As the Vexarians conferred among themselves, Zendrix's voice carried softly to Jackson. Impressive strategy, Earth being. The Vexarians rarely face such philosophical conundrums. The human uses their own values against them, the Kralax added with what sounded like appreciation. Director Valora finally turned back to Jackson. Your request for communication with your homeworld is denied. However, your performance in this exchange merits expanded study parameters. Jackson maintained his composure, though disappointment coursed through him. He'd hoped for more, but any change in status could provide new opportunities. You will be relocated to the Advanced Cognition Wing, Valora continued. Keeper Lyrics will oversee your expanded assessment protocols. As the session ended, and Jackson was escorted back through the exhibition's winding corridors, he caught glimpses of other habitats, ecosystems housing creatures beyond his imagination. The scale of the operation was staggering. You performed exceptionally, Lyrics said quietly as they walked. Few specimens challenge classification so effectively. I'm not a specimen, Jackson replied, the words now a familiar refrain. And neither are most of the beings here. Lyrix's head tilted in what Jackson was beginning to recognize as contemplation. Your perspective is disruptive. The exhibition has functioned under established protocols for over 300 cycles. Sometimes disruption leads to progress, Jackson said. You've been studying the galaxy's species in isolation. What might you learn from observing cooperation instead? They had reached the advanced cognition wing, a section with larger, more complex habitats. Jackson noted immediately that the security barriers looked different here, more sophisticated, but potentially with different weaknesses. Lyrix activated a new enclosure, one with actual furnishings that more accurately resembled human living quarters. These accommodations should better suit your physiological and psychological requirements. Jackson entered, noting the increased space and amenities. Actual water facilities, something resembling a bed, even surfaces for writing or drawing. Tomorrow you begin comprehensive cognitive assessment, Lyrix explained. Director Valora has taken personal interest in your case. And what about you, Lyrix? Jackson asked. Has your perspective on humans changed since yesterday? The Keeper's compound eyes fixed on Jackson with unreadable alien emotion. I have submitted a formal request to specialize in human studies. Your species defies conventional classification parameters. As Lyrix departed, Jackson allowed himself a small smile. Progress, not freedom yet, but a crack in their certainty. Tonight he would rest, gather his strength, and continue planning. The Vexarians had made a fundamental mistake. They'd captured a human, but not just any human. They'd captured a commander of Earth's Unified Space Command, trained in xenodiplomacy, survival, and tactical thinking. Most importantly, they'd captured a human who understood that sometimes victory didn't require escape or confrontation. Sometimes it required making your captor question the very nature of captivity itself. The uprising. 3 weeks into his captivity, Jackson had established a routine. Each morning began with physical exercises, push-ups, squats, and stretches, performed deliberately where the exhibition visitors could observe. Afternoons were filled with cognitive tests administered by increasingly specialized Vexarian researchers. Evenings provided his only solitude, time to process what he'd learned and plan his next moves. Today, however, broke the pattern. Jackson awoke to flashing amber lights and a low-frequency hum reverberating through his enclosure. Alert status initiated, announced the facility's automated system. All keepers report to emergency stations. Exhibition closure in effect. Jackson moved to the transparent barrier of his habitat, pressing his palm against it as he peered out into the main corridor. Vexarians hurried past, their normally graceful movements now urgent and jerky. Something was wrong. Keeper Lyrix, Jackson called out as the familiar blue-scaled figure rushed by. What's happening? Lyrix paused, compound eyes rapidly dilating and contracting, a sign of stress Jackson had learned to recognize. Environmental control systems are failing, Lyrix explained quickly. Temperature regulation, atmosphere composition, gravity modulators, all experiencing cascade failures. Jackson immediately grasped the implications. The other specimens, some won't survive environment shifts. Precisely, Lyrix confirmed. Priority protection protocols are engaged, but resources are limited. The Keeper hesitated. I must attend to the aqueous wing. The Melosian Coral Collective will die within minutes if their water salinity shifts. As Lyrix hurried away, Jackson studied the chaos unfolding beyond his barrier. The exhibition housed thousands of species, each requiring specific environmental conditions. A system-wide failure would be catastrophic and potentially deadly. He pressed his hands against the barrier, feeling the slight fluctuation in the energy field that he'd noted during his first days. The emergency had diverted power from containment systems. The barriers were weaker. A strategic opportunity, certainly, but Jackson found himself thinking not of escape, but of the beings in danger. The Vexarians were scrambling, obviously overwhelmed by the scale of the crisis. Lyrix, Jackson shouted as the Keeper reappeared, now accompanied by 2 other Vexarians carrying equipment. Let me help. Lyrics dismissed him with a gesture. Remain calm, human. Emergency protocols are in effect. Your protocols are failing, Jackson insisted. I have crisis management training, military command experience. Use me. The keeper paused, 6 eyes blinking in rapid sequence. The human offers assistance, Lyrics said to the others. Absurd, responded one, its scales darkening with what Jackson had learned indicated skepticism. Specimens cannot assist keepers. A thunderous boom shook the corridor as something exploded several sections away. Alarms intensified. Primary circulation hub failure imminent, announced the automated system. Evacuate sections 7 through 12 immediately. Lyrics made a decision. Emergency override, barrier deactivation, advanced cognition wing, section 9, enclosure 3. The barrier before Jackson dissolved with a sharp electronic whine. If you attempt escape, security drones will terminate you, Lyrics warned. Do you still offer assistance? Jackson stepped out, freedom tantalizingly close yet irrelevant in the face of the emergency. What's your most critical need? The ancient wing, Lyrics replied, already moving. It houses our oldest and most environmentally sensitive specimens. Temperature control is failing their fastest. Show me, Jackson said, falling into step beside the keeper. They raced through corridors, passing scenes of increasingly desperate activity. Vexarian keepers frantically worked to stabilize habitats, while maintenance drones attempted repairs on sparking, damaged systems. The ancient wing was housed in a massive domed chamber where dozens of specialized habitats formed a circle around a central control hub. Inside each enclosure, creatures unlike anything Jackson had ever imagined struggled as their environments began to fail. The central regulatory system is offline, explained Lyrics, pointing to the smoking console at the center. Each habitat requires manual recalibration. Jackson surveyed the scene with practiced military assessment. You don't have enough keepers. How many habitats can lose environmental control before their inhabitants die? None, came a voice from behind them. Director Valora had arrived, accompanied by Science Administrator Thorne. Each represents the last of their kind, extinction-level event in progress. Jackson didn't waste time. You need a triage system, priority based on immediate survival risk, and you need to decentralize. Each habitat needs independent environmental control. Impossible, Thorne objected. The systems are integrated. Then we make them separate, Jackson countered. Reroute power directly from your emergency generators to each habitat individually. He pointed to equipment being rushed in by maintenance drones. Those atmosphere processors, they're portable units, correct? Lyrics nodded. Emergency stabilizers, but they require programming for each species' requirements. How many tech specialists do you have available? Jackson asked. 3, Valora replied, mandibles clicking nervously. Not enough, Jackson decided. Gather every keeper with basic tech knowledge. I'll coordinate a response team. Each habitat gets 1 keeper and 1 portable unit. We bypass the central system entirely. Valora hesitated only briefly before nodding. Implement the human strategy. What followed was organized chaos. Jackson positioned himself at the chamber entrance, directing teams of keepers as they arrived. He quickly assessed each habitat's status, prioritizing those where specimens showed the most distress. Crystalline Collective first, he ordered a team. Their structure is already destabilizing, then the methane breathers in Habitat 7. His military command experience proved invaluable as he established clear communication chains, delegated authority, and maintained calm among the increasingly panicked Vexarians. When a habitat containing floating orbs of pulsating light began to darken, Jackson himself grabbed a stabilizer unit and joined the response team. Their energy field is collapsing, warned the specialist keeper. We need to boost the photonic emission rate by 30%. Jackson's fingers flew over the stabilizer controls. Rerouting additional power from my unit. Adjust the wavelength to match their resonance pattern. The orbs gradually brightened, their pulsations steadying. How did you know to adjust photonic wavelength? The keeper asked, astonished. I didn't, Jackson admitted. But I've observed similar light patterns in the energy beings in Section 4. The principles seemed applicable. Throughout the crisis, Jackson noticed something remarkable. The Vexarians, initially reluctant to take orders from a specimen, now responded to his commands without hesitation. The hierarchy of knowledge that defined their society was being superseded by the practical reality of crisis. 4 hours into the emergency, the situation began to stabilize. Independent environmental controls functioned in the most critical habitats, and repair drones had isolated the cause of the system failure. A power surge from an unexplained source had overloaded the central processors. As Jackson helped secure the final habitat containing a swarm of microscopic hive entities, Director Valora approached. Your intervention prevented 16 extinction events today, the director stated, voice modulator conveying what might have been respect. The exhibition preservation mandate has been fulfilled due to your assistance. Jackson wiped sweat from his brow, exhausted but satisfied. Preservation seems like a value humans and Vexarians share. Indeed, Valora's head tilted. Your behavior contradicts our species assessment data. You had opportunity to attempt escape, yet prioritized preservation of non-human life forms. That's because your data is incomplete, Jackson replied. Humans don't just seek freedom for ourselves, we recognize the right of all sentient beings to exist. Thorne joined them, examining data on a floating display. The humans' crisis response protocol was 37% more efficient than standard Vexarian emergency procedures. Adaptive thinking demonstrated superior outcomes. The findings will require extensive review, Valora acknowledged. Science Administrator, prepare a comprehensive report for the High Council. Jackson knew this was significant. The High Council was the Vexarians' governing body, rarely involved with exhibition matters. And what about me? He asked directly. Do I return to my enclosure now that the crisis is over? Valora and Thorne exchanged complex communication through rapid eye movements and subtle shifts in their scale coloration. Your status requires reconsideration, Valora finally stated. Until the High Council reviews today's events, you will be designated as Crisis Response Consultant rather than Specimen. The change in terminology wasn't freedom, but it was progress. Does this consultant role come with fewer barriers? Jackson asked. Restricted movement privileges will be granted, Thorne conceded reluctantly. Under supervision. Lyric stepped forward. I volunteer to supervise the consultant. As the emergency teams continued their work, Lyrics guided Jackson to a different section of the exhibition, a research center where Vexarian scientists analyzed data rather than specimens. This will be your new accommodation, Lyrics explained, gesturing to quarters that resembled a small apartment rather than a habitat. The transparent barriers were gone, replaced by a simple door. There are still security measures, the keeper warned. Attempt to access unauthorized areas and immobilization protocols will activate automatically. Jackson nodded, understanding the implied threat while appreciating the improved conditions. The director has authorized your access to non-classified exhibition data archives, Lyrics continued. Your insights regarding other species may prove valuable. Knowledge exchange, Jackson said, that's progress. After Lyrics departed, Jackson explored his new quarters. The furnishings were more accurately human-proportioned, the temperature more comfortable. A console in the corner presumably provided the data access Lyrics had mentioned. Jackson activated it, finding a wealth of information about the exhibition specimens, though notably nothing about Vexarian society itself or galactic navigation. Still, it was a start. He began reviewing the data, paying particular attention to species classified as sentient. The Vexarians' categorization system was fascinating, intricate, logical, yet fundamentally flawed in its hierarchical approach to consciousness. Hours later, a signal at his door announced Lyrix's return. "The High Council has reviewed preliminary reports of today's events," the Keeper announced. "They have authorized unprecedented protocol modifications." Jackson raised an eyebrow, meaning, "Tomorrow, you will address the Council directly. They wish to assess human diplomatic capabilities firsthand." This was the opportunity Jackson had been working toward, direct contact with Vexarian leadership. "I'll need more information," he said. "Council protocols, cultural expectations, proper forms of address." Lyrix's scales shifted to a lighter shade, a sign of approval. "I am authorized to provide such briefing." As they discussed Vexarian political structures deep into the night, Jackson realized something had fundamentally changed. He was no longer viewed as merely a biological curiosity. His actions during the crisis had forced a reevaluation. "One thing still puzzles me," Jackson said as their session concluded. "What caused the system failure in the first place?" Lyrix's compound eyes performed their rippling blink. "Preliminary investigation suggests deliberate sabotage." "Sabotage by whom?" "Unknown," Lyrix admitted. "But there are factions within Vexarian society that oppose the exhibition's work. Some argue that containment of sentient species violates natural law." Interesting, thought Jackson. The Vexarians weren't monolithic in their views. There were internal divisions, philosophical disagreements, just like humans. "Get some rest," Lyrix advised. "Tomorrow's council appearance will determine much about your future here, and potentially about relations between our species." As the Keeper departed, Jackson lay back on his more comfortable bed, mind racing with possibilities. In just 3 weeks, he'd progressed from specimen to consultant. Tomorrow offered the chance to become something even more significant, an ambassador. The crisis had created opportunity, and Jackson had seized it. Now he needed to leverage this momentum to achieve what had seemed impossible weeks ago: recognition of humanity as equals in the galactic community. He closed his eyes, mentally preparing his address to the High Council. The words would need to be perfect, the first official diplomatic exchange between humanity and the Vexarian civilization. Whatever happened next would change not just his fate, but potentially the course of human history, the Alliance. The journey to the High Council chamber marked Jackson's first glimpse of the world beyond the exhibition. Escorted by Lyrix and a quartet of security drones, he was transported via a crystalline pod that glided silently through transparent tubes, revealing the true scale of Vexarian civilization. The exhibition, massive as it had seemed from within, was merely one structure in a sprawling metropolis. Towering spires of iridescent material rose thousands of meters into a lavender sky, connected by networks of transport tubes. Flying vehicles in countless shapes moved in perfect harmony through designated flight paths. Most striking were the immense botanical structures integrated throughout, living architecture where buildings and plant life merged seamlessly. "Your civilization is beautiful," Jackson remarked, genuinely impressed. Lyrix's scales shifted to a pleased hue. "This is Nexara, primary knowledge hub of the Vexarian Assembly. Over 12 million citizens contribute to research here, all devoted to gathering knowledge." "Knowledge is existence," Lyrix replied, reciting what sounded like a cultural mantra. "Through understanding comes elevation." The transport pod slowed as it approached the tallest structure at the city's center, a spiraling tower that seemed to defy gravity, sections of it rotating slowly in opposing directions. "The Council Spire," Lyrix explained, "the highest concentration of knowledge in 17 galaxy sectors." As they disembarked into a vast atrium filled with Vexarians of varying scale patterns and colorations, Jackson felt every alien eye track his movement. For most, he realized, this was their first direct observation of a human outside containment. "They're frightened," he noted quietly to Lyrix. "Not fear," the Keeper corrected. "Categorization instinct. They seek to place you within their understanding." "And what category have you placed me in?" Jackson asked. Before Lyrics could answer, a resonant tone echoed through the atrium, and the gathered Vexarians parted to form a path toward massive doors inscribed with intricate mathematical symbols. "The council calls," Lyrics said. "Remember the protocols we discussed. Speak only when acknowledged. Maintain factual precision. Emotional displays will diminish your credibility." Jackson nodded, straightening his posture as the doors opened to reveal the council chamber beyond, a perfect hemisphere with concentric rings of elevated platforms. Upon each platform sat Vexarians with elaborate shell patterns and deep, vibrant scale colorations that Jackson now recognized as indicators of elevated status. At the chamber's center stood a raised dais with 12 seats arranged in a circle facing inward. 11 were occupied by the most ornately adorned Vexarians Jackson had yet seen. The 12th seat remained empty. "The High Council of Nexara acknowledges the presence of the human-designated Jackson Reed," announced a Vexarian at the circle's apex, its voice amplified to fill the chamber. "Approach the recognition point." Jackson moved forward to a marked position at the edge of the central dais. He felt hundreds of compound eyes examining his every movement. "I am Supreme Knowledge Keeper Xerx," continued the lead counselor. "These proceedings will determine appropriate classification for your species based on recent observations and today's assessment." Jackson inclined his head respectfully. "I am honored to address the council. I come seeking understanding between our civilizations." Murmurs rippled through the chamber at his articulate response. Xerx's mandibles clicked in what Jackson had learned indicated surprise. "The Foundation report will commence," Xerx announced. "Director Valora, present your findings." Valora stepped forward from a lower platform. "Esteemed Council, the human specimen—" A pause, then a correction. "The human representative has demonstrated capabilities significantly exceeding previous classification parameters." The director detailed the events of the environmental crisis, emphasizing Jackson's leadership role and the efficacy of his intervention strategies. Holographic displays materialized, showing Jackson coordinating emergency teams and stabilizing failing habitats. Statistical analysis confirms 37% improved crisis response outcomes following human strategic implementation, Valora concluded. Additionally, subject demonstrated prioritization of collective welfare over individual escape opportunity. A different counselor leaned forward, scales shimmering with skepticism. "One individual cannot represent an entire species' capabilities. Our records of human history indicate persistent violent tendencies and primitive tribal conflicts." Jackson recognized his cue. "If the council permits, I would address this concern." Xerx's eyes performed their rippling blink. "Proceed." "Humanity's history contains both conflict and cooperation," Jackson acknowledged. "Like any evolving species, we have struggled to balance our instincts with our aspirations. But our trajectory has consistently moved toward greater unity, collaborative achievement, and peaceful exploration." He gestured to the chamber around them. "Your magnificent civilization wasn't built in a day. Neither was ours. You've judged us based on observations of our past and limited interactions with isolated individuals. I ask for judgment based on our potential, on what we might become together." This prompted intense discussion among the counselors in their melodic language, too rapid for Jackson to follow. Finally, Xerx raised an appendage for silence. "The human presents a philosophical quandary," the Supreme Knowledge Keeper stated. "Our classification system evaluates based on demonstrated capabilities, not potential ones." Another counselor, smaller with brilliant golden scales, interjected. "Yet potential itself can be measured through adaptive response patterns. The human's crisis management demonstrated unprecedented adaptation." "Science Administrator Thorne," Xerx acknowledged, "present the comparative analysis." Thorne approached, activating a complex three-dimensional display showing graphs and symbols Jackson couldn't decipher. "Human cognitive architecture demonstrates unique configuration," Thorne explained. "While quantitatively below Vexarian capacity in computational processing, Qualitative analysis shows superior adaptability factors. They bridge intuitive and analytical thinking more flexibly than any cataloged species. The presentation continued with detailed examinations of human decision-making processes observed during Jackson's time in the exhibition. The Vexarians had analyzed everything: his problem-solving approaches, communication patterns, even his physical exercises. Most notable, Thorne concluded, is the speed of situational reassessment. When presented with novel challenges, response adaptation occurs 2.7 times faster than Vexarian mean baseline. The implications weren't lost on the Council. In a crisis, such adaptability could be more valuable than raw processing power. "We acknowledge the data," Jerk stated. "However, a more pressing matter has emerged which bears on our classification decision." The Supreme Knowledge Keeper activated a new holographic display showing an unfamiliar section of space. Red indicators pulsed at several points. Long-range observation outposts have confirmed expansion of Kravaxian territory into the Dormal sector. 3 previously independent systems have been subjugated within the past cycle. Jackson recognized the name from exhibition data he'd reviewed. The Kravaxians were a predatory species that expanded through conquest rather than exploration. "How does this relate to humanity's classification?" asked a counselor. "The human territory lies 17 parsecs from the projected Kravaxian expansion vector," Jerks explained. "Based on current patterns, first contact between species would occur within 3 cycles." Jackson grasped the implications immediately. "You believe Earth will be targeted." "Inevitable," confirmed Jerks. "The Kravaxians seek resources and biological distinctiveness. Your planet offers both." "And yet you've made no attempt to warn us," Jackson said, careful to keep accusation from his tone. "Non-interference with pre-alliance civilizations is fundamental law," Jerks stated. "However, circumstances evolve. The Kravaxian expansion represents universal threat parameters." The empty 12th seat suddenly illuminated, and a holographic figure materialized. A Vexarian of ancient appearance, its scales faded to pale blue. "The Oracle joins the deliberation," Jerks announced, all counselors inclining their heads respectfully. "I have observed the human since its arrival," the Oracle stated, its voice ethereal and layered with harmonics. "A probability calculation has been completed regarding humanity's role in coming events." The ancient being focused its compound eyes on Jackson. "Your species stands at a bifurcation point. One path leads to extinction, the other to becoming a foundational component of galactic stability." "And what determines which path we take?" Jackson asked. "The choice before this council today," the Oracle replied, "and your actions as first contact representative." Jerks rose, indicating elevated protocol. "The Council will now deliberate classification status privately. The human will withdraw temporarily." As Jackson was escorted to an antechamber, his mind raced. The stakes had escalated dramatically. This wasn't just about his freedom or even humanity's recognition. It was about Earth's survival against an approaching threat. In the antechamber, Lyrics remained with him while the security drones took positions at the entrance. "The Oracle's appearance is unprecedented," the Keeper said quietly. "Such direct intervention occurs perhaps once in a generation." "Tell me about the Kravaxians," Jackson requested. The exhibition data provided only basic information. Lyrics's scales darkened with what Jackson now recognized as dread. "They are categorized as apex predators on a civilization scale. They do not trade. They do not negotiate. They consume resources, knowledge, genetic material. What they cannot use, they destroy. And they've never been stopped. 3 civilizations have successfully repelled initial Kravaxian incursion," Lyrics explained. "All possess technology significantly exceeding current human capabilities." Jackson paced the antechamber, considering the implications. "So the Vexarians face a choice: warn humanity and potentially accelerate our technological development, or maintain non-interference and allow nature to take its course." The dilemma extends further, Lyrics said. The Vexarians possess defensive capabilities that could protect your world, but deployment would require formal alliance, a status never granted to a civilization at your development stage. Before Jackson could respond, the chamber doors reopened. Xerxes' amplified voice called him back to the recognition point. The Supreme Knowledge Keeper's posture had changed, more rigid, formal. The High Council has reached consensus. Classification determination follows. The chamber fell completely silent. Based on demonstrated capabilities, adaptive potential, and oracle probability mapping, humanity is hereby classified as provisional alliance species, status pending. Murmurs of shock rippled through the chamber. Lyrics' scales pulsed with surprise. This classification permits limited knowledge exchange, defensive coordination, and diplomatic representation, Xerxes continued. Full alliance status will be determined by mutual cooperation outcomes. Jackson maintained his composure despite the surge of triumph he felt. Humanity accepts this classification with gratitude and commitment to mutual benefit. As first implementation of this classification, Xerxes stated, you, Jackson Reed, are appointed provisional human ambassador to the Vexarian Assembly. You will assist in formulation of Kravaxian defense strategies and preparation of first contact protocols with your civilization. It was more than Jackson had dared hope for, not just recognition, but partnership. A path to protect Earth from a threat it didn't yet know existed. I accept this responsibility, he said solemnly, but I must communicate with Earth to effectively serve in this capacity. Xerxes' compound eyes fixed on him. The Council anticipated this request. Limited communication will be permitted under controlled circumstances. The formalities continued, details of Jackson's new role explained and recorded. He would work directly with the Vexarian Strategic Division to develop defense plans. He would help prepare comprehensive first contact protocols to minimize cultural disruption when Vexarians officially revealed themselves to humanity. As the session concluded, Jackson found himself surrounded by counselors eager to establish individual knowledge exchange protocols. The transformation was remarkable, from specimen to diplomat in less than a month. Later, Lyrics escorted him to new quarters within the council's spire itself, spacious rooms with views of the spectacular Vexarian cityscape. Ambassador quarters, Lyrics explained, configured for human physiological requirements. Jackson walked to the panoramic window, gazing out at the alien city that had become his temporary home. Will you continue as my liaison, Lyrics? I have been appointed diplomatic coordinator for human relations, the Vexarian confirmed. The director believed our established communication parameters would prove advantageous. Jackson smiled. She was right. After Lyrics departed, Jackson was finally alone. He sat at a desk fashioned to human proportions and began drafting his first official communication to Earth, a message that would forever change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. He chose his words carefully, aware of the historical significance of this document. It would need to explain his capture, the Vexarians, the exhibition, and his new diplomatic status. Most urgently, it would need to convey the Kravaxian threat without causing panic. As he worked, Jackson reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had begun as a captive, reclassified as a consultant, and now appointed ambassador. Each step had required him to demonstrate humanity's best qualities: resilience, adaptability, compassion, and strategic thinking. The Vexarians had intended to study humanity as fascinating specimens. Instead, they had found partners in the greater cosmic community. It was an outcome neither species had anticipated, yet one that might save them both from the approaching darkness. Jackson looked again at the alien city stretched before him, feeling both very far from home and exactly where he needed to be. Tomorrow he would begin work on Earth's defense, drawing on Vexarian knowledge while contributing human insight. The human beast had not only escaped its cage, it had transformed its captor's understanding of what it meant to be human. And in doing so, it had opened the door to humanity's greatest challenge and opportunity, taking its place among the stars not as specimens, but as equals.